So sorry, I just need to ask one more question. Is Sarah the only one who is going to attend today, or how
We
is
we
it?
had we had 7 more people registered. That I don't know if they will join or not. I suggest in any case starting
Okay.
for the main reason that you will probably have other things to do, and I also have to jump basically immediately into another meeting after this one. So
Okay, perfect. Then so I mean every time Sarah has a question, she can interrupt me, but for now then I will just speak it in a way that I'm speaking to record, basically,
perfect.
if it's fine for you. Okay. So today we're going to talk a little bit about stress. Can you see my full screen or is it being hidden
Yes.
by the... Okay, perfect. So what is stress? Everyone nowadays think about stress a lot. Everyone says like we are super stressed all the time, but rarely we know what stress is. So stress is the body's response to any insult. That means like when you're facing a challenging situation or when you're just in a new environment, your body is trying to adapt itself, and that adaptation process is what we call stress. Whatever procedure or whatever things give you the stress, it is called stressors. Sometimes it can be real, which is like, for example, you're crossing a street and then a car jumps in front of you. So that's a real stressor because that situation can be very dangerous. Or the stress can be perceived. For example, some memory of an event that happened long time ago that can make you anxious, that can make you stressed, but it's just a perceived stress because there is no real danger at that moment. There are different types of stressors, as I mentioned before, the physical or environmental stressors, which can be like, for example, famines or flood, or not being able to have good nutrition, for example, or like a lack of sunlight. They can all be called stressors. On the other hand, there are also some things called the social or emotional stressors, which means if you have a family problem, a work problem, or you have a fight with your friends, or witnessing a very sad event, that is what people call social or emotional stressors. So, as you know, we can have multiple types of stressors, just to give you an example. And based on the duration of how long the stress exposure is, you can call it acute stress, which means like it lasts only for a few hours or days, or chronic stress, which means it lasts for a longer amount of time. And chronic stress is the one which is more dangerous than the acute stress. So what happens in the body under stress? So there is this particular axis in in the body of every organism, every vertebrate organism, and including humans, that we have this something called the hypothalamic pituitary axis, which is the hypothalamus and the pituitary in the brain, and the adrenal cortex function together in such a way that they release some kind of chemicals to be able to help you fight, flight, or freeze in a particular situation of a stressful environment. Now, when people think about stress, they always think that stress is bad. However, stress can be also positive because without the stress system that you have in your body, you will not be able to go for this fight, flight, or freeze response. Basically, you will not be able to survive without a particular stress response. So it's very essential for learning process and also survival. However, maladaptive stress is what concerns us. So maladaptive stress means like your body has been extremely under stress for a long time. In the case that you become super irritable, aggressive, always thinking about revenge, or you have these anxiety situations, something that makes you super scared and you begin to avoid someone or some place because you keep remembering about bad things that happened in that place. So those kind of prolonged stress are the ones which we call maladaptive stress response. And this is something that we commonly face, staying in bed if we have a very sad situation. Then sometimes we just cannot get out of bed, cannot like enjoy the social life. And then we begin to also have a slow cognitive process, which means the way we think, the way we make decisions all become terribly bad. Now, that's why maladaptive stress response is concerning. But again, to point out, stress itself is good because it is something that helps you survive. However, when the stress is prolonged for a long time, that's when it becomes bad because it brings with it all of these other things that are terrible for your existence. Passive stress coping. So there are different stress coping strategies. Passive stress coping, where we have these, social withdrawals as symptom where you don't want to hang out with your friends anymore, or excessive eating of junk food, where you just feel like, you want to eat all of these McD, KFC, all these other stuff that are available, but, with a lot of fatty fries, or binge watching Netflix, something that I sometimes do by myself. Um, so all of these are symptoms of passive stress coping because it doesn't really allow you to, mitigate the stress problem that you are facing. And this kind of way of stress coping is how people begin to have depression or anxiety disorders at a later time point. And if you keep doing this, every time you become stressed, then it can become a conditioned response, which means you will not be able to get out of these particular stress coping strategies. Um, so when these kind of stress is not handled properly because you have been undergoing passive coping of stress, what happens is you can begin to have this highly risk-taking behavior. For example, you can become like, oh my God, I'm going to challenge this police officer, or I'm going to do whatever my parents tell me not to do. Kind of lack of inhibition is one of the symptoms where stress is not handled properly. The next one is like search for instant gratification, drug addiction, or mobile addictions, which is very common because when you are under stress, what happens is your dopamine levels become very low. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter in the brain, which is important for your brain functions. These kind of neurotransmitter, when it becomes very low, that's when you begin to have all of these addiction problems. And one other condition is like when you're super stressed, you become aggressive, like always irritable. Someone may say something very nice to you, but then you might be like, why is this person talking to me like this? So you begin to think in your head all the other negative, aggressive, irritable things, even though someone is just speaking normally to you, because there is a high level of something called cortisol, which is the stress hormone in the body.
Sorry, may I ask a
Yes.
question about the first point? Um,
Yes.
how, because for the other ones you mentioned that one come from dopamine and the other for cortisol.
Hmm.
But for this one, the exaggerated risk-taking behavior,
Hmm.
what actually causes that? Like, how is that related to stress?
Okay, that's a very good question. So this risk-taking behavior usually is because of the effects of the uh, cortisol again on the nucleus accumbens, which is a part of the brain which controls our goal-oriented behavior. So when this is affected, too much affected in a different way by stress, that's when people begin to take the risk-taking behavior. Does this answer your question, Eugenie? Yeah? Okay, perfect. And so on the other hand, like when you're super stressed, you cannot sleep at night because you have this hyperactivated sympathetic nervous system. That's something that also leads to anxiety and mood disorders. If you cannot sleep well, you will be experiencing all of these anxiety and mood disorders. Again, after a period of like high stress activity, some people become super tired, like I said before, not wanting to get out of bed. That is an experience that comes because of hypocortisol, which means low amount of cortisol, the stress hormone. Um, and this is something I think we face very commonly in the day-to-day life nowadays, because everyone is always saying that they are super tired for some reason, cannot sleep at night, and super, irritable. It's funny because stress has been existing forever since, I don't know, since humanity began, let's say, but um, but it's only now that people have begun to perceive the stress much more for some reason. One important thing I have to mention here is that when your body cannot handle stress, it's not only the brain that is affected. So of course, affecting the brain means you're going to be anxious for a long time. You will have the development of the psychopathic tendency, the migraines, which means the headache, or some kind of psychosis symptoms. But it's not just the brain which is being affected by stress. So it's also the heart, which has where people begin to have experience of stroke syndromes and other heart diseases. Your immune system is going to be lower, and you will begin to have skin dull appearance of the skin, or like have multiple breakouts in the skin. So if you want to have a glowing skin, then you need to be able to handle stress. One motivation to handle stress. Or you can also have these psychosomatic symptoms in the body, which means like, you have pain somewhere in the body. You cannot explain why you have these pain in the body, but it's because of the high level of stress hormones that are floating around in your body. Also, there's this digestive system problems. So gut disorders, like every time you eat something, you want to go to the bathroom kind of thing. So stress also modulates this digestive system. And last but not the least, I have to mention that stress can also lead to terminal diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's disease, and Parkinson's disease. And that's why it is important that we know more about, stress perception, and how we can become resilient to all of these stress effects. So why is stress perception increasing in the past few years? Like I said before, stress has been existing for a long time, but our perception, or the way we view stress, has increased in the past few years. It's mostly because of our modern lifestyle, where we are mostly in the rooms, in the institutes, where we don't hang out in nature. And also our inclination towards passive stress coping. If you remember, passive stress coping is the type of coping where you have this social withdrawal, don't want to hang out with your friends anymore, eating a lot of junk food, or just binge watching Netflix. So what happens is that, so when someone gets angry, there are a lot of chemicals floating around, and if you do not do any exercise, or if you do not move around to release those chemicals, it stays in your body and it's going to be much more destructive. Secondly, like I said before, we have these sleep loss problems every time we are stressed, because there is a hyperactivation of the sympathetic nervous system. And when there is a sleep loss, what happens is we cannot delete negative emotions. So sleep, it's not just about rejuvenating your body, but also about trying to replay all of the events that happened on that day, and trying to minimize the impact of the negative emotions, which will be helpful in the long run. But if you do not have proper sleep, then this is lost. Like, negative emotions are going to build up, and that's where anxiety disorders and depressive disorders come into being. And when you have this excessive eating, with the passive stress coping, the eating of the junk food and everything, it increases the reactive oxygen species inside the body, which means there will be much more damage in your body. And so all of these are terrible for our survival. And sad but true, the depression has been on the rise for a long time, for the recent past few years now. So mostly you can see the rising charts mostly for the females compared to the males, which means that the females need to be more careful about how to handle stress. And, our recent COVID-19 incident, where we have been socially isolated for a long time, this is the one that is triggering a lot of depressive disorders. And the scientists now thinks that in the future, there will be a huge increase in the already increasing epidemic of stress disorders. So it's very important that as individuals, as young students, we know more about stress and stress resilience. So what is stress resilience? Now, we have talked about stress disorders, passive stress coping, and Now we can talk about active stress coping. So active stress coping is something that is related to stress resilience. So stress resilience basically means being able to maintain yourself in a functioning state, in a healthy state, despite the presence of stressors. There may be multiple stressors in your life. I don't know, a lot of work problems, like a lot of uh, things that is happening between you and your friends, but still, despite the presence of those stressors, you can maintain yourself in a very active, healthy environment. That's called stress resilience. But the resilience capacity is different for everyone because it is dependent on your genetics. How many friend circles you have, whether you can rely on your friends, how much good nutrition you have at that time, or are there too many stressful events that are occurring in your life at this particular time, whether you exercise properly or sleep properly, and how you perceive stress. They are all very important factors in bringing about stress resilience. One more important thing, I mean, if we have like contact here, I could have asked one question about these, but let's skip this one for the time being. But I want to mention that everyone has a different perception of the same event. For example, let's say I say something like, okay, life is beautiful. For example, I say this. Now everyone will be thinking about different things. All of you will be thinking about different things. And it depends, what you think depends on what kind of event you have faced in the recent past, or how you look at life. So this is something that is called perception. But stress perception, how you perceive stress, is very important in achieving stress resilience. Now, stress resilience, I have explained it in a little bit of a behavior way in the beginning, like in the previous slide, but now just to look at the chemicals inside the brain. So stress resilience means a good balance of the neurotransmitters inside the brain, the oxytocin, the dopamine, the endorphins, and the serotonin. They probably, you may have heard of them nowadays. It's quite popular in the Instagram reels and TikTok videos, so you might have heard of them. One of the ways that you can achieve a little bit of um, good balance between all of these neurotransmitters is by doing exercise and yoga, because it improves your circulation and reduces or releases the excess stress hormone that comes inside your body, improves your endorphin or serotonin levels. So endorphin is also this happy hormones. Also serotonin partially is also this happy hormone. If you take a walk in nature, it will boost your endorphin and serotonin and also your gut microbiome. If you can remember, I said that when someone is super stressed, it affects the gut system and the digestive system too. So taking a walk in nature can boost all of these serotonin levels and also improve your gut microbiome. On the other hand, good nutrition is also important. Instead of eating junk food, one should go for more healthy food, which is more natural, because they are much better in providing you fibers and also antioxidants. And it's also important that you spend time in hanging out with your friends or families, because it will boost oxytocin and serotonin. Develop a good sleep routine, because sleep is one of the most important things in which all of our brain begins to do what it is necessary for keeping it alive and youthful. Reduce your stress workload, let's say. I mean, sometimes it's very hard to reduce the stress workload at the moment, because there are too many things occurring at the same time. But whatever is possible, just do it. Whatever you can do, maybe sometimes learn how to say no. If someone is telling you too many things and you don't want to do it, learn how to say no, because that will definitely reduce your workload, which is going to be beneficial for you in the long run. I don't know if you have seen any of these K-pop stuff. It's very famous, Korean pop. It's famous in Southeast Asia and also here in Europe and also in the America. So do what you like to do. I mean, sometimes, okay, you have to do your homework and other duties in life, but still you need to keep time for doing what you love to do, because they are the ones which are going to bring up your, again, this neurotransmitter levels. On the other hand, if you cannot control your stress impact, or if you cannot improve your stress resilience by doing the above procedure that we have mentioned, for example, yoga, good sleep, or taking a walk in nature, if you cannot handle your stress by these methods, then of course it's important that you go and take some help or counseling from people who are more experienced. For example, this cognitive behavioral therapy. I mean, I would not suggest taking any kind of drugs, as in like any kind of pharmaceutical drugs at the moment, if you can handle your stress properly, because these pharmaceutical drugs, even though it can help you in, in reducing the symptoms of depression or anxiety for some time, in the long run, it's not very helpful. So it's best to do it in the way that is natural first. And if you cannot control it, and if it's too much, of course, you have to go for the um, alternative options.
I have a question. What is
Yes.
stress inoculation?
Stress inoculation means so if you know about vaccination, so it's a very similar thing to that, if I can explain it in that way. So let's say for a virus, for flu virus, we usually take a vaccine so that you are protected against the next flu episode or exposure that you have. So in that similar way, stress inoculation is letting you face some stressful situations, but in a controlled environment, making you being able to overcome that stress, so that it registers in your mind, that you can overcome it. So it builds some kind of synaptic plasticity, as in like how muscles can build strength, the brain can also build strength, and it can build strength by training itself from little stress exposures, which you can overcome. And every time you overcome one level, you have a next difficulty level which you have to overcome. In that way, you can inoculate yourself against stress, like in the long term, in the future. Did I get your question properly?
Yes, just my question is whether that is also like a type of psychotherapy, or is it done? I don't really understand in which context this is done, or is it something that one
So
does oneself?
yeah. So no, it is done in a very controlled environment. This is a very recent thing that has been developed among the psychotherapists, the psychiatrists, and also the psychologists. So it's not well practiced at the moment, but this is something that is being developed currently. Sometimes it happens that the psychologists and the psychiatrists go to school and teach students about how to do stress inoculation. So it doesn't happen by just you doing it by yourself. I mean, we all have experienced personally stress problems, and sometimes we overcome it, sometimes we cannot overcome it. But when we cannot overcome it, that's when it begins to take a different turn into anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorders. So you have to do these things in a very controlled environment, and the psychologists and the psychiatrists are there to help you and guide you at every turn. So um, did I answer your question?
Yes. So in my last sort of follow up, because what you
Yeah,
said of some people coming to like schools or places to talk about this, it's like
yeah,
I have the feeling that this should be something very like individualized to each person, like
I
personalized
agree.
for, because I do fear that like the from what I imagined initially when you said going to
Hmm.
schools, I
Hmm.
felt if you give students an exercise to do on their own,
Hmm.
when you have a pool of students that some of them might have come from a
Hmm.
past experience of trauma or
Right.
from some other personal stressors that you're not considering, then it might be that the same exercise for different people might have different
I agree. I
effects.
agree completely. Yes, yes, it is true. So they come to schools, but it's not like giving everyone a bulk amount of exercise. So it's like personalized a little bit. But the first amount of stress that they give, I think they do a certain kind of test to see which groups one will cluster the students into.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. So, stress resilience, apart from all of these things, like I said before, which is also my favorite way of stress resilience, is to change your perception on how you view stress. Not to think about stress as something that is always negative, but to take stress as something which is a positive event in your life, because that is something that is going to help you grow into someone who is stronger. um, and stress itself, our physiology has has developed the stress response because it is important for our survival and also for learning and memory formation. So instead of viewing stress as something that is always very negative, one can try to look at it in a different way and see something, take it as a positive experience. Um, so just to give a small example, like an analogy, so you know about water, it's always there, but when it's like cannot be handled properly, that's when we call it flood, and it can be very damaging. You have seen multiple floods in TVs, and sometimes even in the Instagram reels. So it can be very damaging, but the same water, if you can harness it properly, that's when you begin to have a hydroelectricity where you can get a lot of power drawn from it, because of which you have electricity at your home, because of which I can talk to you right now, and because of which you can use your mobile phones. So the same thing, if you know how to handle it in different ways, can bring very different results. So water can be very destructive, but our ability to harness it changes everything. In this way, so what happens is when you are more solution oriented, or when you think about stress as an opportunity for you to learn more, your brain circuits inside the brain are connected in a different way, let's say, than when you think about stress as a problem, always looking at the problem and not seeing beyond the problem. That's when it becomes terrible. So this is just a small paper. I don't know if you have experience with articles or not, but articles are where scientists usually, like, put out their findings, and that's where they found that when you look at stress in a different situation, it can make you very creative. But if you begin to look at stress in a negative way, it connects in the circuits, the brain circuits connect in a different way. In fact, one of the recent studies have found that people who perceive stress as bad, they die earlier than the ones who perceive stress as good. So you know what to do. Um, Now that we have talked about stress, the different ways of coping with stress, passive coping, active coping, where active coping is the much healthier version of stress coping. Let's talk a bit about mental health. So when we talk about mental health, sometimes people get scared, because mental health, people equate it to mental illness, but it's not really that. So having a good mental health means like stress resilience, but being able to make good decisions, being able to, have a proper goal orientation, to be able to socially interact with people, be able to speak out what you want. All of these things are what makes someone have a good mental health. So when people talk about mental health, they always think about mental health problems, but we should not take it that way. When we talk about mental health, we should look at all the other aspects which make a human being perform in their best possible way. So like I mentioned a little bit before, just the last points to remember is that when you are angry about something, don't uh, don't just sit around watching movies or doing nothing, but take a walk somewhere, release all of those extra chemicals that are running inside your body, because when you do that, that's actually going to help you out. when you have this flight or freeze response, which means you want to run away from a situation, or you are just like, I don't want to get out of bed. I'm just going to sit on the couch and do nothing. So in those situations, what you can do is move your body a little bit to increase the circulation, because what your body is telling you is that it needs a little bit of movement. Oh, yoga, yoga, I've tried it. So yoga for me is the best thing. So it really helps you out in giving a very clear mental attitude. So I would recommend yoga to everyone here. And it's very important that you start looking after your mental health from today, because you won't know when it goes down, right? You will only know it when it begins to get into this high level of degradation, where you see depression coming in, the anxiety disorders coming in. That's the only time when you will begin to notice that your mental health has gone down a little bit. But whatever you are facing right now, the parts of it had started a long time ago. I'm sorry. That's why it's very important to look at the mental health from today onwards. Also, stress can affect the next generation. For example, if your parents have been stressed very before, or if your grandparents have been stressed very before, it's going to affect how you respond to stress at the moment, which means if you are very stressed right now, and if you do not know how to handle your stress, it's going to be transmitted to the next generation, that is your kids or your kids' kids. This is why it's very important to know about how to stop the disorders from stress. But apart from it all, a good mental health allows you to perform in your best able state. So it's important. And the most important stage for building a good mental health is, during your early stage, below the 18 years of age. If during this time you have a terrible life episode, for example, addiction or depression, uh, it is going to affect you in the later stages of life when you become an adult, because the most important memories or the most important brain circuits are formed in a younger state, and that's what remains even when we grow older, because the character or the brain circuitry is set around that time. That's why, again, I stress upon this fact that we need to know more about stress resilience, because what you go through right now, what you cannot overcome right now, it's going to haunt you forever in the adulthood. That's why this presentation today is very important for you. Now, thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope that I have been able to give you some insights into why having a different perception of stress matters a lot, because that's what is going to make the whole difference between what is going to be degrading and what is going to be uplifting, or something that is good. That's why the stress perception is also very important. So your task after this information today is, what you can do is list some of the events that you have considered stressful in the past, something that made you terrified, angry, or just, sad, where you want to cry all the time. List some of those events. Look at it, try to look at it from another point of view. For example, let's say you lost a bicycle. I mean, yeah, losing a bicycle that you really like, it's not the best thing. It's something that will make you angry and sad. But maybe then you can take it as a lesson of like, okay, why did I lose my bicycle? Um, what can I do in the future? How can I improve myself so that I do not keep losing these things? So just look at it from another point of view, and then you can just think about it yourself. Okay, I lost my bicycle, but maybe now I can walk, which is much better for me. Because what has happened, losing the bicycle is something that you cannot change, but you can change how you view it and how it will affect your brain circuitry. And develop that attitude at every turn in your life where you face a stressful situation. Try to look at things from different angles, not just from the negative side, but also from the positive side. Because like I said, what has happened. You cannot change it, but the way you look at things can change how you respond to it in the future. So you have learned today about many important things. Now it's your task to apply it and try to reorient yourself and see how things work. Okay. Thank you so much. That's it from my side.
Perfect. Thank you. I actually have a question regarding what you said about this time, that of course it is very important for young people to
Hmm.
um, learn to manage the stress. I do feel there was one part that was not clear for me, because you
Hmm.
said that the circuits that are formed during this time then
Yeah,
um, s- become like permanent in a way. But in
sort
a
of.
way, yeah, that to me gave me a bit the impression that now, if a student that is like 10, I don't know,
Hmm.
loses one parent in
Hmm.
a very traumatic way, then does
Hmm.
that mean that they will be like forever traumatized? Like, can you like
Hmm.
never change those things once the
So, what happens is like at that particular time of the moment, the you know this child can develop two ways, right? Okay, my parent has passed away, and and let's say he faced another terrible situation, like if it's the mother who passed away, the father brings another wife and the wife bullies the kid. So that would be like stress upon stress coming together, which will change the connections between the brain region hippocampus and the brain region amygdala in a certain way that whenever this particular child faces a little bit of emotional connection situation in the future, when they are trying to search for their girlfriend or boyfriend, yeah, it's going to affect them. That's why they say childhood is very important, because that's the trauma remains for a long time. But it doesn't mean that you cannot change it a little bit. You can change it a little bit, but uh, the what do you say? The signature kind of stays for a long time. Did you get what I mean, or was I like
yeah,
talking
no,
too
I mean,
much in the
it
other
is,
area?
it is clear. In a way, my question is more oriented towards like, there are some treatments
Hmm.
for things like post-traumatic stress disorder.
Definitely.
But if I'm not mistaken, they're precisely trying to rewire these things.
I
Like,
agree.
and does this mean that trauma that happens early in life is harder to change than trauma that happens later?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know.
Yeah, but it also depends on the strength of the trauma,
Yeah.
definitely on the strength of the trauma. But it's because I can explain again in another way from the connection point of view or the wiring point of view from the brain. So, what happens in the brain when we are born is we are born with a lot of brain cells, but depending on how the environment gives feedback to the brain, only the ones which remain, which have the strongest connection remains. So that in the later stages there will be some branches here and there, but the circuitry is almost perfectly set. So when we do psychotherapy, let's say, to try to look at the past and to, to reorient a little bit, it does help in pruning some of the connections, but not all of them. So it resurfaces at one point of time or the other.
But in that sense, then it is also true. And now that I'm reading this slide again, the last point that says
Mm-hmm.
that they're critical period for building stress resilience. So in the
Mm-hmm.
same way that you can affect one circuit by having a stressor, you can also
Mm-hmm.
train your brain to respond better to stress. Like if you learn coping strategies
Yes.
early enough,
Yes.
then more traumatic things that happen later in life are
Mm-hmm.
coming to a brain that already has strategies to cope.
Exactly.
And therefore, you will.
Exactly.
Good.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
good.
That's where the stress inoculation that you mentioned also comes into play.
Ah, that's a very good connection. Yeah. So like if you
Okay.
do these types of things, one thing that I noticed, I don't know if you noticed it as well. Sorry, I'm taking the floor. Um, but I did notice that for I have many nephews and nieces,
Mm-hmm.
and now they are like in school,
Mm-hmm.
um, actually teaching them something that for me they never taught me. That
Mm-hmm.
is like to name their emotions
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and to
wow.
like
Mm-hmm.
learn to identify what exactly they're feeling. Like if a child, like in kindergarten, if they start
Mm-hmm.
crying, they're
Mm-hmm.
like, Are you angry? Are you frustrated? Are you sad? Like, and the fact that they teach them to identify exactly what's causing this,
Mm-hmm.
I think actually helps them deal with stress much better.
Yes,
Like I
I
feel that they
agree.
don't get like overwhelmed in like something is wrong, I need something to change. But
Yes,
they
yes,
go into
yes.
more a proactive, like, okay, why are you angry? What is this
Yeah.
something you can do something about?
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that this might be related to this, like creating stress resilience, like learning
Mm-hmm.
to like categorize your emotions and see which ones you
Yeah,
can do something proactively and which ones
exactly.
you can't, and then how do you accept the ones you cannot change. And
Yes,
it
yes.
was really really interesting.
Yeah, I think Athanasia has a question.
Yeah.
You have to unmute.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
So I like your talk. I wanted to
Thank
ask
you.
a bit the link between stress and depression, because some
Mm-hmm.
of the things you described were kind of common, like aggressivity without reason. Or can you elaborate a bit more on the link between stress and depression, if there is any?
Mm-hmm. There is a lot of relation between stress and depression. So when you cannot handle stress properly, that's when the depressive disorders come into being. So stress, as you know, we described a little bit in the beginning. So stress is not always negative because stress is a response of your body to help you survive and adapt or change depending on what kind of environment you are facing at a particular time point. But in the modern world nowadays, where we usually go for a passive stress coping strategy, where, let's say we have a terrible situation with our friend, instead of going out or talking to this person and trying to resolve the situation, or releasing your excess anger chemicals that are building up in your body, what you usually do is like scroll the reels of the TikTok, or just sit and eat a lot, or just watch Netflix. So all of these do not help in releasing the um, hormones or the chemicals that are building up in your body because of the stress. If you use the stress chemicals in a very positive way, it can help you adapt. But that's when you cannot maintain your stress, or when you do not follow proper strategies of coping with your stress, that's when you begin to have these mental degradation little by little by little, and that's when you begin to have this depression. Also, one thing that I would like to stress upon is that when you are super stressed out, right, you usually cannot sleep at night because the mental stuff is always going on in your head. I should have done that. I should have done this. Why did this person do that? So it's always replaying in our head. So when you cannot sleep properly, the brain cannot what do you say, heal itself, let's say. So every night you go to sleep, the brain has its own system to clean to clean the whole circuitry, as well as to uh, delete negative emotions. But when you cannot do that because you're super stressed and you cannot sleep at night and you continue that for multiple days, then the negative emotions build up inside your brain, and that's what the depression, the picture that you see here is coming out. So if you have too many negative emotions inside your brain, uh, that relates to too many negative unuseful chemicals inside your brain, and that's where depression comes into being. But when you're depressed, it just means you have to give yourself or your body some time to recuperate and recharge by going for yoga, eating good nutrients, and exercising, having some people that you want to talk to, like having that social buffer. They're all important. So Athanasia, I just wanted to know if I answered your question or if you want to have more questions.
No, I thank you. It was covering me.
Okay, perfect.
Great. So I think, at least for me, your take-home message was really trying to change this perception around like seeing stress as a possibility, like you mentioned with this hydroelectric dam. That was actually a very good example, like how water can be damaging, but water can also be a source of energy for us, and the same can happen with stress.
Yes.
And I think you gave us a lot of really interesting strategies to try to retrain ourselves. Even if, in cases like mine, um, I've lived this period of like young
Mhm,
childhood and adolescence a long time
mhm,
ago, but
mhm,
still, that doesn't mean that I cannot do anything about it. So
mhm.
I'm I'm very, very glad I had the chance to listen to this talk.
Thank
Um,
you.
if there's any more questions, we can ask them now, and otherwise, I will thank Monika for her time.
Thank you so much, Eugene. But can I ask, like, before we close this
Of
session, can
course.
I ask what problems you faced before, and if it's still continuing, if it's, I don't know, if it's too personal for you or if you want to share?
No, no, I mean, I don't think I was referring to one specific problem, just in
Mm-hmm,
general.
mm-hmm,
I do realize that a lot of the things that I learned as a child,
mm-hmm,
as like responses to
mm-hmm.
stress or to like negative things,
Mm-hmm.
might not really be the most useful. And
Yes.
now I'm thinking like many of those things are very hard.
Mm-hmm,
Um, I don't know, changing like what I was saying of my nephews and nieces of like,
mm-hmm.
is this something I can do something about or not, is
Yeah.
really something that for me was always something I struggled, and I wish I
Mm-hmm,
would have learned so early
mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
like know, like, okay, am I angry right now? Yes, what exactly am I angry? Am I angry at
Mm-hmm,
my own
mm-hmm,
reaction to it, or at somebody else's reaction to what happened?
mm-hmm.
And all those things, I think they're very useful to learn, and
Yeah.
it's nice to teach from a young age.
Yeah, I think so too. For me, I learned it only, I don't know, a few years ago, like to understand the emotions that I was going through. But I think now that people, the scientists have begun to work more on stress mechanisms and stress resilience, I think we are becoming more informed about when we should start interventions or to build all of these strong walls so that it can help us in the future. So I'm glad that the young kids are learning it nowadays. We were not that fortunate, let's say.
Yeah. And you mentioned also the COVID-19 pandemic
Right.
and how that one is expected to affect a lot.
Hmm.
Um, so you think it is mostly because of the social isolation, or
It's partly because the social isolation, and the part of the other one is the stress and anxiety that came with the COVID, not knowing like who is gonna die, not
uh,
knowing when the schools are going to reopen, not knowing when your friends are going to be able to see you again. So it's all of that mixed together. It becomes a very toxic pool, which is a perfect source for generating all of these anxiety disorders. Like I also said, the mental health decline, it starts at somewhere here, but you will be able to identify when it hits this point. So that takes a long time, 6 years, 7 years, sometimes 2, 3 years, but it depends on the person and what kind of situation you are facing at that moment. So we think right now is the incubation time for the mental health disorders that came up because of the COVID-19 situation.
Got it. Good.
Okay.
Great. Then thank you so much for all your time and
Thank you
for
so much, Eugene.
your expertise. It was really, really useful and really a really, really interesting talk. So
I
want to
I
thank
thank
everyone
you for
else.
also organizing this, and also to Sarah and Athanasia for listening to this particular topic. I hope that it will be able to help you out in the future.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
All right, then. See
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.